Because I'm not very good at character modeling, I usually start with a reference image or inspiration image to get the right proportion and general shape. After that, I follow the skin modifier process and with a limited amount of sculpting to finish. Because the body is not the focal point of this piece, I kept it very loose and just tried to get to the correct general shape and proportion. Modeling the dress is a really simple process as well. Basically, I started with circles and deformed one at the waist because the dress wants to conform to the waistline, and then just a larger circle lower at each tier, bridge edge loop between the circles to make mesh. Because the texturing process of the dress rely on vertex paint, I did triangulate the mesh and break it down a little bit. Once you created a new material, you will see a default principled BSDF node in your shader editor. To achieve the transparent pattern, I connected a texture, just a black and white texture, and you can use the noise texture, or if you can find a texture that you like, connect it into the alpha channel. And if you press Ctrl T, a texture coordinate node group will show up that allow you to influence the offset and the scale of the pattern. Be sure to unwrap your mesh first by selecting all of the surfaces, press U, and you can either go directly to unwrap or smart UV project. You still don't see anything transparent showing up, but you should see your pattern showing up. To make it transparent while it's plugged into the alpha channel, head over to the materials panel and turn the blend mode into alpha hashed, and I also turned the shadow mode into alpha hashed. Here I also added a color ramp node after the texture so that I can control how tight or how loose the transition between black and white. Play with it until you achieve the look that you're after. So yeah, I think this is more or less what I'm looking for, transparency, and then I move on to the next part, which is coloring. Go from object mode to vertex paint mode. And then in your material editor, from the base color point on your principled BSDF node, pull out a node and type color attribute. And make sure you select attribute which matches the attribute on the top of your model editor screen. So now you are ready to paint. Pick your color and start painting. Once you get your transparency and your color to a point that you like, it's time to work on that translucent fabric look. And we're going to mix an emission shader into what we have created. Search for emission and search for a mixed shader node. With these two nodes, plug the principled BSDF into one of the channels in the mix shader and plug the emission shader into the other channel. And from here, you can tweak the factor to make the mix either a higher percentage towards the principled BSDF or emission. And if you head over to the render viewport, you may not see anything show up. They might all look black, and that will be because you don't have your light turned on. So make sure in your scene you have a default sunlight. For this top tier, I feel the transparent pattern, the texture that I picked initially, is a little bit too camouflage looking. So if you find yourself in that situation, what you can do, very similar to how we can mix two shaders together, you can also mix two patterns together. and I mix it with the color ramp that's coming off of the other pattern, right? Because I want the mixture to happen after the color ramp has sharpened the previous pattern. And I also can add a color ramp to sharpen this one just so that both patterns can be a little bit more pronounced. And the mixing mode I'm using here is mixed. Experiment to see what is interesting for your piece. Between multiply and add and mix are usually the ones I use. All the tiers follow a very similar process, and this is a quick look at all of the tiers and their node setup. My approach to that is to model a surface and scatter particles that has emission to it. This is a very simple shape. You could probably easily make this. Make sure that you do introduce subdivision or any other means of getting more vertices into your shape. I also use the deform modifier to give it a little bit more variance so that it's not a very rigid shape. Once you have your shape set up, it's time to make the little sparkle. And for it, I use a simple icosphere just so that it has some shape, but it doesn't have a lot of vertices. For this icosphere, I give it a material with emission quality to it. And later I'll show you how to introduce different color. Right now, let's just keep it a simple single color. In order for you to see the emission, make sure that you turn on bloom. Use your particle tool of choice to scatter it onto the mesh that we have made earlier. If you had scaled your sparkle from a larger geometry down, once you scatter it, they're going to show up super big. And all you have to do is go back to the original object that you're scattering and apply the scale, and then it will get smaller. Okay, here's a little extra credit on how to scatter the sparkles onto the dress if you do not have a scattering add-on like the GeoScatter or Deep Paint Addon. The easiest way is to use a geometry node. Promise you this is a very simple one. I'm using the cone to approximate the dress. Head over to the geometry node editor workspace and select the cone and hit new. That will give you a geometry node based setup, and add a geometry node modifier for the cone. Head over to add and select a distribute point on face node. Drop it in between input and output. You will see that the cone disappear, and then you see a whole bunch of little dots. This is Blender's way of selecting points randomly off of the vertices of the cone. You can change the density, how many points you see, and also the randomized seed. The next step is to make the glowing ball to go to those location of those points. For that, we need an instance on point node. Once you drop it between the points input and the output, it will connect points to points and instance out. You see the cone disappear, but don't panic. It's just because it's waiting for you to tell it what instance to scatter on. Pull from the instance in the instance to point node. Once you release the left mouse, you can pick the object info node on the very top. This will give you the familiar eyedrop to allow you to pick the glowing ball to scatter. Now, everything shows up huge, and it's because the scale, and we can change that by hovering over X. Hold down your left mouse, drag it all the way down so you can change all three values at the same time. And you can change it to an approximate correct value. Don't worry about this because we'll change it later. We don't want all of the scales to be the same, and we want to introduce a little randomization into this. Go to add, type random value, and drop that node and plug the value into scale. Everything turns huge again, and that's because we need to modify the minimum and maximum scale. And from here, you play with these values until you get it to a point that that works for your scene. And here is a look at this geometry node. It's super simple. to give the sparkles different colors. Plug in an Object Info node and a Color Ramp node. In the Color Ramp, choose the different color that you like the sparkle to be. And you can control how tight you want the transition between the colors to be, or if you want it to be more graduate. Now connect the random value into the factor and connect the Color Ramp's color output into the color input of the Mission Shader node. And if you like more than 2 colors, you can also add with the plus button additional color into the mix. At this point, the base mesh is ready. So you can head over to Mixamo and pair your mesh with one of the pre-made animations. In my case, I wanted the movement to be more subtle. I couldn't find what I want. If you also couldn't find what you need in the pre-made animations, here's a look at how I made this very simple movement. When animating the dance move, I use the IK control to move the hands and the feet. I basically control the body with the 3 bones near the center, the bone to drive the waist, and the 2 hip bones. Animate only a complete cycle of a movement, and then apply the cycle modifier. And after that, it's just setting up a camera movement and render. I hope you find something useful in this process. Thank you for watching.